Hello, and welcome to the inaugural YDA week. My name is Danny Edwards. I'm the co-editor of Shots, and Shots has been a partner with the YDA since its inception. As you and your liver will no doubt be aware, the Cannes Lion Festival, during which the YDA usually takes place, didn't happen in 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. However, the YDA decided that highlighting this year's crop of new directorial talent was too important to cancel, so the awards is continuing, albeit slightly later than usual and in an online capacity. The judges have been hard at work viewing the entries and deciding on this year's winners, and that winning work is going to be announced on Thursday of this week at 6 p.m. Central European Summertime, so make sure you tune in for that. Ahead of that, though, this new look YDA has given us the opportunity to programme some extra content in the lead up to the ceremony. So over the coming 3 days, we have a series of one-to-one chats during which I will be talking to a series of directors and producers, as well as some other pieces of content across the week. So the theme of the YDA in 2020 is humour. So while each of the one-to-ones cover a series of topics, all of them dig into that particular theme as we ask our interviewees how they use humour, why it's one of the best ways to convey a message, and whether now, with all that's going on in the world, laughter is a brand's best weapon. Later today, you'll be able to see my chat with the director of the amazing documentary Be Natural, The Untold Story of Alice Guy Blaché. That's Pamela B. Green. Be Natural tells the story of the world's first female director and her often forgotten place in filmic lore. Then tomorrow we have a special presentation from brand and innovation director and partner at And Us, and also regular Shots columnist Amy Keane, who will be tackling humour in the age of social media in her talk called Karen, Meme or Mean. Then I'll be talking to directing Leviathan Ram Madhavani about the importance of new talent and why commercials is still a great place for new directors to begin their careers. Wednesday then sees this year's YDA jury chairman, Corinne Bartoletti, in conversation with the YDA president and the sort of driving force, I would say, of the YDA, Francois Chilot. The pair will call on their experienced producers at the centre of advertising production to discuss the present and the future of the business and the outlook for aspiring young talent in the years ahead. Finally, throwing caution and format to the wind, I'll be ending with a 1-to-2 chat with former YDA chairwoman and the MD of Chelsea Pictures, Lisa Mayling, and Chelsea director Nisha Ganatra, who has helmed innumerable TV shows including Transparent, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Mr. Robot, Girls, as well as features including Late Night starring Emma Thompson, plus the recent amazing Lebrecht campaign, Womb Stories. But first, I got the opportunity to sit down with former creative turned director and one of the minds behind Budweiser's amazing, successful, iconic campaign, Whassup, to discuss the use of humour in dark times, moving from commercials into features, and the best way for aspiring young directors to get noticed. So make sure you tune in for all those things. Make sure you take the chance to see who's won this year's YDA categories on Thursday, and yeah, hopefully you enjoy everything that we've put together for you. Thanks. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to the YDA one-to-one chat, and I'm very pleased to say that today I'm going to be talking to Justin Reardon. Justin is a brilliant director and has his own company called the Royal Budapest Film Company in Hungary, which is where he'll be talking to us from. He started life as agency side, most famously, at least up until now, probably, he is one of the creatives behind Budweiser's ultra successful Whassup commercial campaign from, I think, 2001 onwards. He's a director of note of commercials for clients like Samsung, Axe, Gillette, Heineken. He's directed a feature film with Chris Evans called Playing It Cool. And at the heart of everything that Justin has done pretty much has been comedy and humour in some way, shape or form. So we are going to be talking to him about his career, about his views on comedy and humour, the use of it in advertising and beyond, whether now's a good time to be using comedy, aspiring directors and tips for them of how to break into the industry in the way that he did, moving from agency side to directing and everything in between. Justin, thank you so much for joining us at the YDA one-to-ones. It's really good to talk to you. Slightly different settings, obviously, than we would normally hope for, but nevertheless, it's good to have you on the line.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This is an exciting topic, one that the only topic, as I said, I know about. Yeah. Other than that, I'm quite useless.
I wouldn't say that. Definitely wouldn't say that.
Well, my wife would. I can bring her in, and no, he's pretty useless. Yeah, but he's funny every once in a while.
We'll get a cutaway. Don't worry. We'll get a cutaway later.
Yeah.
So yes, as you point out, so humour is our overarching topic for the YDA this year. So we're definitely going to get to talking about that and your background and the work that you've done in that genre. But before we get to it, just a bit of background about yourself. So how did you get into directing? What was your route into it? You were agency side first, I know, but was directing always the goal for you?
Yes, 100. I was, I've got the typical childhood dream. When I was a kid, I was lucky that my parents, they had video cameras, beginning with the first Sony black and white video camera. And luckily my parents were never into, they were into buying technology, but not into reading directions. So all the technology kind of went to me, and I was the only one using it. So I fell in love with shooting stuff really early on. I used to do the editing tape to tape with these big, huge VCRs. And so it was an early age, but that I was also surrounded by music and art. So my mom still is an incredible artist. So in my family, everyone was drawing, and that's how I spent all my time drawing. And I tell everybody today that, when I eventually, all through my life, when you're drawing and you're in your own mind, you can really start acting things out, and you can start constructing scenes. Obviously, at the time, movies like Star Wars were coming out, and these explosions of imagination were just inspired by a lot of things that were happening in filmmaking. So I wanted to be a director since I was a little kid. My dream was to go to California and make a movie. And that was my childhood dream. And I'm happy because I actually was able to accomplish that. But yes, I did start in advertising because after art school, I was really I felt I was done with school that was going to tell me, judge my ideas. I felt like I really wanted to either fly or sink based on my ideas, rather than have a teacher or an instructor sort of sit there and kind of try to mold my thinking. I was more into trying to get the tools on how to express my thinking. And I think that was a big deal for me because I ended up using advertising because I was told by my uncle's brother-in-law, who worked at Leo Burnett in Chicago. He said, you can learn everything about filmmaking in advertising. And at the time, as this kid who was in art school at the time, I didn't know exactly what he meant. But when I got my first internship, I was blown away at, the idea that you come up with an idea and you write it in your book. And then eventually, after a long process, you have a finished tape. And back then it was like 3/4 inch tapes. They were like, that big, and you put them in like a giant microwave. It was just bizarre. Yeah. It's like these big things. I don't even know if people even know what they are anymore. But I found that advertising, and this is why I think advertising is an incredible first step, because it teaches you how to work your ass off. And if you want something, people just aren't handing out opportunities. You really need to prove to people that if you put your faith in me, I can make you look good. And I think that's what this industry is all about is, people that might be friendly, they might be, encouraging, but unless you bring some sort of value to the table, it's hard to keep building those opportunities. But in advertising, I sort of was a yes man, but also excited about, being in this big building, and they had recording studios, and they had resources and people with experiences that I was just like, just tell me everything you know. And I remember somebody asking me my first week of being an intern, they asked me, "Oh, do I want to be a creative director one day, or this or this?" I was like, "No, I'd like to be in advertising, learn how to, make films, and then move to LA."
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I spent 3 years in advertising, and then moved to LA and became a nobody very quickly, and went broke. So yeah, I feel like I experienced the kind of like the I definitely earned my stripes, I would say.
But do you think that advertising still has that draw, or still provides that bedrock for filmmakers? Do you think that that's still a good avenue for people to explore who want to become directors, to go into advertising?
I think you can, and this was me. I knew what I wanted going in advertising. I knew what I wanted to get out of it. That's why when I left, I was able to, break ties and refuse to go back, because advertising, it's sort of cushy. I mean, you work hard, but you're also doing something pretty fun and exciting. I think if you go in with the mindset, with your eyes open, it's sort of like when the first time I ever was on a film set, when I sold my first commercial. And I went from Chicago, and they flew me on a plane to LA, and I sat in the most comfortable seat I'd ever sat in. And 2 years before, I was, in a college, living with college roommates, smoking bong hits, and then suddenly I'm shooting a $350,000 commercial and being put up in Los Angeles in a really nice hotel. Blew my mind. However, the first day I was on set, I remember looking at everything going on, looking at the DOP. He was looking at lenses, and I got so overwhelmed and like this anxiety attack. Like, how am I ever going to know all this? It's impossible. I remember asking the DOP, like, how do you memorize all the lenses and this and that, blah, 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 blah. And eventually I realized that, no, it's just, if you have the pictures up here and then you can explain them, you have this great resource of talent around you,
right?
That can help you realize your vision. And eventually, if you want to geek out and really get into all this, the technical stuff, which I find very interesting, then you can do that. But again, I think if you come in as an advertising creative with this idea that you want to be a filmmaker, you pay extra attention to what's going on set instead of hanging out, craft service, cracking jokes, eating Snickers, which I like to do too. But you really have to be specific. Like during the editing process, really pay attention to what's going on. I got so into it that I ended up learning how to press the buttons, meaning I learned how to edit. So I was editing all of my work in the beginning. Now it's like people want like 50 edits of this and that. And so it's sort of like, I'll do a brand campaign or something like that, but I'm not going to do like the 95 different assets that you need to support the campaign.
Yeah. So do you think that the commercials industry is enticing to directors now as maybe it was for you? I mean, you sound like you kind of almost fell into it, but do you think people are aware that becoming a director in a commercial setting is a really good first step? Or maybe not just the first step, it's a good career in itself, but it's a good step if you want to become like a feature film director or a documentary maker.
It gets you in the door, and it gets you extremely close to filmmaking. Yeah. Because I think, and this is sort of something that I've always tried to do, is manage what I spend my time on. If you sort of like, you can go to film school and that's great. And whatever works for you. I mean, everybody has a different path. My path is insane. Like the way my career ended up and whatnot. And now I'm in Budapest, Hungary. I'm a kid from New Jersey. You know what I mean? And I lived in Chicago for 5 years in LA. And now I'm living in Budapest, Hungary. I like never would have thought that. However, that's part of the game is recognizing these opportunities and also following your heart. You got to really do the things that you're sort of wired to do. You can only fake it for so long. Yeah. Like me, my family's funny. I came from a really funny Italian, like half Italian, half Irish. The Irish side, they make jokes out of everything. At a funeral, it's like people are, finding a reason to try to laugh, and then obviously my Italian side, more emotional, this and that, but they've got like more the sarcasm, Jersey Italian too, the sarcasm that kind of, that just is unleashed. Like my mom is funny. My stepfather's funny. My dad's funny. Everybody's funny. So I sort of grew up really being able to turn to humor for personal, ways to kind of get through situations, way to make people feel comfortable in a room. Yeah. You walk in a room and everybody's tense, and then you make a couple jokes, and suddenly the one thing that brings people together is a good laugh. So yeah, I mean.
So that was something you're always going to gravitate towards. That's a good segue, because like you said at the beginning, so the theme for this year, the overarching theme for the YDA is humour and comedy. And obviously you're a great proponent of that. So it sounds like comedy was always something you were going to gravitate towards. Is that fair to say?
I believe that comedy is an emotion, like every other emotion, sometimes even more valuable. Like I believe that you have to experience the full range of emotions in anything. But there's something really beautiful about laughing and laughter and humor. And again, you look into somebody's eyes and you make them laugh, and there's that instant. It's a real physical response to things. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, humor. I grew up around it. Everybody was funny. But at the same time, when you throw artistry in there, if you can, I know some funny people. I mean, a lot of my friends back in LA are writers and this and that. And you have some people that are just hilarious in real life and maybe not so funny on the page. So I think there are, there is definitely some disciplines around extracting that humor out of you. There's some things I believe are funny in real life, but I would never do and try to do on film, because it's just not, it doesn't work. So I think you sort of have to go, okay, well, how do I make, for example, commercial humor work? Mm-hmm. How do I make a short film humor work? How do I make a feature film humor work? Yeah. And then, it's all different. It really is, because timing is different. A 30-second, like I believe that 30 seconds is the best format ever in the history of, because the beats are, you can have the 3 beats, but at the same time, the timing, you're out before, you don't have to keep on carrying the laugh, or you don't have to like pace yourself, well, if we're too funny in the front of the film, but the back end sucks, people are going to say, oh, it's a shitty film. But yeah, I mean, again, I think these are things, part of the discipline, like part of the filmmaking, part of the writing, part of the directing, is understanding what the creative space you're working in. Yeah. And then from there, then you figure out how to use your humor. Yeah. And some people are different. I've always been somebody who's very comfortable being way over the top, but not just over the top. I mean, like, I'll go so far over the top, it gets a little weird, like strange and like maybe uncomfortable. But that's the humor that I feel comfortable with and confident. But I do appreciate the super dry humor, and I've done that as well. Mm. And sometimes you're like, well, this is a bodacious, surreal idea, so maybe going over the top is not the right way. Maybe you sort of go dry with this crazy, surreal idea, or maybe you have this tiny truth, this little piece of reality that you want to exploit. So maybe you go like create these cartoon character live action cartoons. So it's like you're constantly trying to balance these levels in your head, and eventually, create the visual representation, like how much dialogue, how much visual. Yeah. Do I need to have any sound? You start thinking about all these things, and that's what kind of completes the entire, output of humor. Within the medium itself. So yeah, I mean, that's where the craft comes in. That's where the experimenting comes in. And that's why, like, if when I was a young filmmaker, I was the annoying kid with the video camera everywhere. And even when I was in advertising, I have videotapes of every shoot, like behind the scenes, all these short films with my friend. I mean, I was so annoying nonstop. However, I had a good sense, and I can't tell people enough how having a video camera can really start to give you the confidence, and because you need to experiment, you need to get out. Sort of like being a writer, you got to write. You got to write like 10 scripts before you can maybe even write a good one, unless you're super incredibly lucky or a genius, which I'm not. So I really believe in putting in the time, putting in the effort to get to know who you are. Because then once you know who you are and how do you, like, what defines me as a director? Because there's so many directors out there and so many talented people falling in line with a trend or falling in line with a, like, oh, I love this director, therefore I want everything to look like Wes Anderson. That happens. And then you eventually one day you're going to be left behind because you've got really nothing new to say.
Well, if you're trying to be someone else, I suppose you will always be compared to a sort of potentially lesser version of that other person. So.
Yeah, and always a step behind because you're like, well, what would he do? Rather than going, oh, this makes me laugh. You know, that's always the thing. It's sort of like in my own head, I always did two things. I would say, would this make my friends laugh? And would this make my family laugh?
Yeah.
And I figure that's sort of, and ultimately, if I'm sitting there writing, you know, I've got all these idea books. If I'm writing an idea and I chuckle to myself, I know it wins.
Yeah.
I know, and sometimes nobody else in the room will think what you wrote on paper is funny.
Yeah.
But it's not about what the paper. I mean, we're not like videoing paper. We're taking an idea off the paper and we're putting it into the video form. Video film, whatever you want to call it, filmmaking. That I can't stress enough. And that's where the confidence, you know, in comedy has to come, because I think in order to make people laugh, you have to commit, and committing is sometimes uncomfortable.
Do you think that's why there's often a lot of very bland, kind of straight and quite boring comedy? Because comedy is so subjective. You know, everyone's, you know, it's a very subjective art form. And I guess, you know, what you might find funny, I might not, and vice versa. And the kind of weirder it is, and the more out there it is, maybe the less brands are likely to go, oh yeah, because I get that. You know, because less. Yeah. So is there always a worry? Is there always, like you kind of have said, on paper, something might not seem funny or read funny, but you have to have the trust to kind of say, look, this will be funny. This will be clever.
Well, within the working environment, the context of getting a job and having, that's where, and I always say you need to come up with a million ideas to make one idea work, meaning that, you know what, when I write and direct my own stuff, I can do whatever I want. But you can't make a career on just doing whatever the hell you want. There are these boxes. And if you want to be in advertising and do commercials or even do movies, to be honest with you, I mean, it depends if you're lucky and if you're like, and married to the daughter of Francis Ford Coppola or somebody where you're sort of untouchable. If you can work in that environment, God bless you, but don't bank on it. It doesn't happen. And so I think what you need to do is realize, okay, well, if everybody's not on board with basically funding my ideas, my first round of ideas, I need to find something that's going to work within the context of the project I'm working on.
Okay.
That's when you really have to generate a lot. And sometimes you start over here and end up over here. Sometimes some great things come out of it. Your brain suddenly can manufacture ideas and that are fitting into, we work in an industry where, you know, a lot of people are checking boxes.
Yeah.
I don't believe in that. I think that's when you just start draining any idea, is when you check too many boxes. However, there's always going to be a criteria for what you're doing. That's why people pay for. The people are paying for this. People are funding my ideas. So, and I always say, listen, I mean, two things I'll always do is I'll fight for ideas. There's certain times where I see something. If you sit in a room and say yes, 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 you're not worth what they're paying you.
Yeah.
I take what I do very seriously, because people pay me pretty good money for my ideas, for my professionalism, and at this point in my career, they're paying for my experience. I know when something's going off the rails.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're in an impossible situation, and that's just sort of and luckily I'm at the point in my career where I've shot, I don't even know how many commercials I've shot, but I've got like 1,000 something on my hard drive.
Yeah.
And so I can sort of kind of like, listen, you tried your best, and at a certain point, it's not your brand. It's not your, and sometimes agencies are like, yeah, man, Justin, we're really in a bad situation with the client. Is there any way maybe we can kind of, and it's like, what am I going to do? Drag everyone through the mud? No, it's not about me. It's about, usually I always try to keep it about the idea. But certain situations really call on, you really have to really kind of churn and keep plugging, trying to find that sweet spot. And sometimes it's not easy.
Yeah.
However, always start with your best.
Yeah.
Writing treatments. I mean, I come out with a lot of ideas. Sometimes it turns people off. Some people are like, but other times that's how I get my best jobs. Right. And all the stuff on my reel, that's from me putting everything I have into what I do. And you gain people's trust. Whoa. If you come up and put everything you got into a project and you're able to kind of chip away at the trust, next thing you know, you're doing the next campaign and things are even a bit more wide open.
Yeah.
So big picture thinking, not each individual project.
Right.
You have to combine the idea that this is my one and only career, meaning you need to keep building a strong reel and you need to stay relevant. Because once you lose your relevance, you need to figure out what else you want to do in life.
Yeah.
Because it's, there's too many talented directors in this world, and there's too many talented directors that are doing great stuff. So you need to keep up and keep the bar high, and kind of keep sticking to doing what you do, because that's it's always that saying of nobody does what you do better than the way you do it, and that's the truth right there.
Yeah. What about comedy in the sort of times that we've been having? How relevant is it, or how likely is it? How far should brands push comedy and humor when in times of kind of darkness, I guess you would say, in the last few months or so, is humor, is this the best time almost to use humor, to sort of put that forward and to try and make people laugh, because so much other stuff is just not funny and not good?
Well, I would say this, straying away from comedy, which I feel like definitely we've done.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking to a person that I used to turn down boards that would make my reel today. I've been very fortunate, but however, I've literally followed ideas all over the world. Sitting in LA, sitting there, hoping that there's going to be enough comedy boards. When I say comedy, I mean funny. Yeah. Not like, this is comedy. Is this comedy? Oh, okay. Like you can't tell. But if you really want to keep, like, I'm dedicated to comedy, and I hate saying comedy because it's not like a topic. It's something that it's an emotion.
Yeah.
It's driving emotion. And yeah, I would say more than ever, we need, humor, because it's the one thing that people can relate to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of messages going on out there right now. And I would say we've strayed away from comedy since it started in like 2008, with the financial crisis.
Right.
I mean, again, the amount of weird shit that was being produced by everybody, AT&T, all the communications, was it Comcast? Everything I was shooting was fucking absurd, crazy. Every idea was nuts. And then after the financial crisis, suddenly it was like, families with sun, backlit and laughing, and became artificial.
Yeah.
And I get some of it. I understand brands, it's not easy on their side, always, because they have so much red tape, and everybody's, you get uptight. You want to hold back during times of crisis, but it's not working right now. It's not. I don't think the world is any better off right now, because we're saying, well, let's push comedy to the side, because out of fear of what? Like this whole idea that you're going to come and put people off or divide people through being funny. I don't get that. I think there's a lot of humor that doesn't rely on making fun of people or this and that, being absurd. when you break from reality, you sort of create this context that anything can happen and it's not real. So therefore, you're not putting yourself into it. It's sort of like watching a Marvel movie. You know, you watch these Marvel movies, people aren't sitting there going, oh, wow. You know, it's like, you know, they're not like, this is really could happen. Yeah. People know it can't happen. Therefore, they just open up their mind and allow a little bit of escapism every once in a while. So I don't think that's so bad for a brand.
No, it's almost like I guess it's a fear of failure rather than a kind of belief in success on their part of you know, wanting to play it safe.
You exactly right. That's why I just never can understand the fear of making people laugh or doing something that is lighthearted, or because there are brands doing it. And I feel like, you know, again, I think I made a lot of my career on doing beer ads for a while, because beer was like, you know, I coming out of college, they had, you know, remember the Dick campaign, the Miller Lite.
Yeah.
This is Dick. You know, he's a creative director at an advertising agency. It was done by Tractor when Tractor first came out and stuff. Yeah. That made me go to, when I was like, again, fresh out of college, and I was going to buy beer for a Saturday night. I went to the refrigerator cases in the convenience store, and I saw a Budweiser and I saw a Miller Lite, because that's what I could afford. And so I went to Miller Lite. That's simple. Just because their ads were fucking funny, and you're associating that fun is associated with beer and friends. And why not support that by going, hey, we understand you. Here's our entertainment. You don't need to go farther than that.
Well, that's another great segue. So did your buying habits change? So winding back sort of, I guess, start of 2001, I think it was. So you worked on Budweiser Whassup as a creator. Yes. So that was and is, I suppose, one of the most famous beer commercials ever.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to, firstly, did your buying habits change after that? Because obviously that was a really funny, I guess it's a less important question, but an interesting one nonetheless.
I didn't have to buy much beer because working at DDB in the beer group.
Oh, right.
I mean, we would get, I mean, beer was always there, you know. So, yeah.
I mean, firstly, tell us a bit about the background of that and how that came about. And also, you know, again, it's to your point of trust, maybe, and you know, those characters have lived on. So they just made a remake of that, or they kind of overdubbed it with the kind of COVID sort of central message. Yeah. So, and that shows the kind of belief in those characters and that story. And it feels like almost Budweiser Whassup was the first, or certainly one of the first kind of entertainments. It was essentially an entertainment series. You know, it was episodic. Yeah. There was the opening one, and then it was sort of the story of those friends. So it's a very long, convoluted question, sorry. But if you could tell us the background of that, and also, did you know when you were making it that that's what it was, an entertainment series in a kind of branded form?
Exactly that. And I think your long question is a very good question, because it hits on the one thing it's funny how you do something really simple and then suddenly all the scientists in advertising, all the, it's the same people who end up in a boardroom doing a chart on comedy. And here, and this is for the first 3 seconds are going to be, it's like, really? Yeah. You just exposed yourself. Get out of the room. If we want to do something funny. But this was, again, I look at the 90s, in so many ways in America, creatively as being, this is when just think about the movies that were coming out all through the 90s. You had the rise of Quentin Tarantino. You've had the Andersons, Paul Thomas Anderson, Wes Anderson. The movies that were coming out were just so inspiring. And anything that comes out in cinema seeps into advertising, especially back then. So you had the 90s that was just sort of like this Wild West of who can do the funniest advertising. And I think, that's why, and I always like to preface talking about what's up and kind of giving a little context to it. It wouldn't happen today. Right. It would not happen today. Just because, and I wrote an article about, I can't remember, it was in some publication. Was it on Shots? I'm not sure.
You did like an on reflection thing, talking about, we should put the link.
Yeah. And I love talking about this because it was a band of misfits. It was this Irish guy named Vinnie Warren who is, let me tell you, like he's like the ultimate ad guy.
Right.
So, and I was a young kid. I was 26 at the time. So, and I had just come over from, I was kind of recruited from Leo Burnett to work. I sort of built a reputation in Chicago for being a very, aggressive idea guy, meaning I was just relentless because I was getting paid to come up with weird ideas. I mean, why wouldn't I work all the time? But I came in to this situation, and I remember the creative director put me in the worst situation of all time. He said, listen, Justin, you're new. I want you to go around and check all the Super Bowl work. Like, I had to go into people's offices and tell them what I thought of their work. And I didn't know anybody. So I had to be critical of their Super Bowl work. Because this is in the Bud group, every year there's like, I don't know how many Super Bowl ads they do today, but back then it was like, I mean, I think they sold like, 10 to 15 Super Bowl ads, Budweiser. So when I went to a lot of the rooms, it was like felt very uncomfortable because I didn't really dig a lot of what I saw, because it was at that time, it was a lot of animals taking beer.
Right.
And I was always like, I didn't understand. Do animals like beer? Like, why are we like, how is that like, anyways, it was a lot of that going on. But then I went to this irate Irish guy, Vinnie Warren's office. I'm half Irish, so I could relate to a little bit of, and his ideas were all over the place in a good way. And they were like real concepts. But he's like, one thing I'd like to show you this short film that I want to make a campaign from. And that's when he had this beat up, VHS tape, popped it in. And it was this crappy video short film of Whassup. It was like 2.5 minute or 3 minute movie. And I was like, this is fucking great, because not only was, I mean, while it was sort of a rough presentation. I mean, you can imagine back then in the 90s video and all that. It's not like today where your iPhone is like, whoa, was that shot on film? And I remember sitting there, and he's like, yeah, I just want to put a line in there, watching the game, having a Bud. And that was it. And the whole branding was them just holding Budweisers.
Yeah.
And what I gravitated to was, I was living in Chicago at the time with roommates. And we literally had the same type of energy, that youthful energy of friends acting like friends, unscripted. It was an unscripted type of idea. Like, so much of advertising was like written by these great copywriters that everything was so like fit, and the timing was perfect, and they had the button on the end. And this was like how friends really act. Everybody had their own little internal thing. That's when, like, as an advertising idea, again, I wasn't really into advertising as much as I was in the potential of entertainment, of commercials being entertaining. But as an advertising idea, I remember going, well, this is about friends. This is like this is the most universal message. This is friends acting like friends, not an artificial version of friends acting like friends where there's a joke and this and that. This is also pure performance comedy. Like, you can't script with somebody's face when it distorts and he's going, I mean, and everybody can also do their own thing. Everybody had their own flavor. My friends and I at the time were saying, "What up?" Which, that's why when I saw this, and I had a friend coming in from work who was at his job all day. I was working and I was at my job all day. We'd come in and we'd see each other, and it was like beers and bong hits the rest of the day, and we're like, yeah, like that energy that friends can only really share, and and it's quite intimate. That's how, like, especially guys react, like, or interact with each other. They have their own little thing. So Whassup, while it was fun for people to say this and that, ultimately, what it was about was friends. And yes, and now today people probably think, oh, there was an effort for urban advertising in the 90s, which was a thing, this thing that was growing. it was friends. It was friends being friends. And that's why when we went to Cannes, I mean, everybody from every country was saying it. And it blew our minds, because that was where it became like this Hitchcock movie, waking up to the radio DJ going, "What's that?" And you're like, did I just hear that? I mean, just imagine like living in this world, being just a normal kid. And then suddenly the world, like it's on Jay Leno, it's on this, it's everywhere. You're on the L train going to work. People are going, "What's that?" And they don't know who you are. And you're like, and then it got bad. Then your mom starts calling, going, "What's that?" And
hello? Where's that? Yo, who's that? Yo, it's D.
True.
Hello? Yo, it's T.
True.
Where's that?
That I think is one of those things where so many things happen that don't normally happen. Like no creative directors showed up on the shoot. The client showed up for like 5 minutes, and clients are like, "I'm out of here." People at Budweiser, I went down personally. I was the one that actually went down and presented it because I could really present, and I had no problem acting things out. But if we didn't have that short film to show, they saw just it's undeniably funny, that whole idea of friends doing this. We just needed to make a bunch of 30-second ads.
Yeah.
And then like what you said, and we specifically said that. We said, this is like our own sitcom. Here are our characters. And how do we keep moving this forward? But we tried to do what I was definitely we knew that this was going to burn itself out pretty quick. So we tried invigorating it with ideas like Wasabi, which based on a true story that happened to me and a producer at 3rd Street, was that Sushi Roku in LA, where literally we were all saying wasabi to the sushi chefs because I didn't know what they were saying. So I said wasabi, and then everybody here. Anyways, but we started invigorating with different ideas, and that's when I'm also from New Jersey. So I came up with the How You Doing? Which was super fun, and it became like this mafia thing. But I left after I did that. I left, and then they did another round of that, and then they started doing like big like CGI aliens doing Whassup, and it got into. Then it started going down that route.
Yeah, jump the shark sort of thing.
But the crazy thing is the initial campaign and these ideas, very low budget.
Yeah,
I mean we're talking.
Is that what made you alone? So was there an element of trust in that you knew what you were doing, but was there also an element of actually this is flying under the radar? So
flying under the radar.
Yeah.
There was no reason why. Like, listen to this. They had. That's why I would say we were a bunch of misfits. I was a young kid, and I was sort of like I didn't really have much fear, so I wasn't worried about saying the right thing or doing the right thing. I had tons of confidence. Mainly probably because I was really young, but our sort of our advertising guru Vinny was sort of like the big picture, how this fits in the world of advertising, and then they brought on a freelance producer to produce it. So you have to imagine this: one of the biggest campaigns in the history of the world. They brought a freelance producer on. So the expectations weren't huge, but also everybody else was working on these bigger budget Super Bowl ads.
Right.
We were the guy doing the, I think Budweiser thought it was an urban campaign at first. And we were sort of like, no, not really, but are you going to pay for it? Let's go shoot, So we went to New York and shot it. But this was definitely flying under the radar. That's why I tell people, it's like, there's no formula. You're not going to go to create a class around how to do this, because the stars had to align, and they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why don't brands, I mean, that's sort of an example of you wouldn't call those characters mascots. Obviously brands have had mascots and kind of, figureheads for decades and decades.
Oh yeah, Tony the Tiger, and
real people, like you said. I mean, they were real people. It was taken from almost a homemade short film. Why don't brands do that? I mean, I guess they're moving into it more with branded entertainment and things like that, but it doesn't feel like brands have learned the lesson of like, hey, let's create characters that people genuinely respond to. Not very often, at least, that people respond to and want to see what happens, and create stories around these characters that aren't kind of, hey, buy a bud. It's more about their lives and things. Is that just because it's things change so often in advertising, people change, jobs change, that everyone wants to put their own mark on it? So those sort of things just never really get a run.
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, people want to put their own mark on it. And I remember when I worked at Leo Burnett, again, it was very, had a lot of influence on me, that experience. But I remember reading, every once in a while they would post some like a line or something on the wall. And I remember reading this one, sometimes it's not what you do, it's what you don't do that helps an idea. And that always resonated with me, because sometimes the best thing you could ever do is just leave something alone. And sometimes your job is to hire the right people. And if you don't have faith in yourself in hiring the right people, it's like me with a DOP. If I'm sitting there going, questioning absolutely everything he's doing, then that's my fault. Yeah. So I feel, again, in the utopian world of advertising, I think there would be more trust. But you know what? And this comes down to a thing where this is always existing. You have a lot of the let's say more of account-driven people. They always think the creative people are trying to get something by on them. And not, and I don't think it's particularly, they try to divide like, well, there's the creative and the business side. It's like, well, a good creative idea and it is really good business. I mean, just look at, again, I hate to use Budweiser as an example because it's so extreme, but you're talking about like the stock, the value of the stocks at the time. You're talking about, a battleship, a brand that's a massive, like, they owned the majority of the shares in that world in beer advertising, but it was always on a small decline, like their market share, because of microbrews and all this kind of stuff. However, this decline is still like hugely profitable. Yeah. In just a few months, this massive Titanic was able to do that.
Really?
Yeah. And what the investment was a little bit of faith, a little bit of trust. We also didn't take the idea and steal it we tracked down that filmmaker who had very little experience. He had done this. His name's Charles Stone, just a fantastic guy, and inspired me, to be honest with you, to kind of do something myself to get me launched as a director, because he did this short video that he thought would be funny. He did it, went to some film festivals. But I'm also, as a director, I've had some ideas that I've done where people come to me with a blatant ripoff of it. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is like my Nutri-Grain spec ad. Yeah. But I don't get the job because I wasn't somehow right for it. And then I see what they end up doing, and it's shocking. It's like, really? Yeah. Like, and the thing is, I think good business decisions are sometimes allowing the people that you choose to kind of do what they do. Yeah. Geez, if you can get nowadays, God, getting your brand out there, the potential for something to go viral. I mean, we're talking Whassup was before there was Facebook, before there was, YouTube. I mean, I did all my spec stuff as well before there was Facebook and YouTube. So if something viral was really because people wanted to see it.
I want to talk about the spec ad in a sec. Yeah. I guess the whole thing about Whassup kind of shows the mercurial nature of advertising and creativity in general, I suppose, because like you say, you had all these other campaigns going on, all these people, I'm sure very professional, very capable people working on these big budget Budweiser ads that were going to hit the Super Bowl and be the kind of success story that I hoped for. And actually it was this kind of smaller thing that people were kind of, oh, that sounds good, but we'll just let you get on with it. No one really ever knows, right? I mean, you can have a feeling about something and you can believe it's going to be a success and work for the brand or whoever it is. But actually, no one really knows what's going to take off and what's going to fly and what's going to become a kind of world-beating commercial campaign.
Yeah.
It's an interesting...
It was, I remember I had something at the time, I was dying to become a director. And so I was hoping to be able to get in to direct some of these things. And I remember my creative director at the time, because after Charles, he was the director, but he's also, what I loved about Charles was, he was the director of this thing. And even though he had like a few Roots videos and he had done like one commercial, nowadays, that would be really hard to get him that job. And like I said, so many creatives would sort of maybe take ownership of it or, make it different enough where they don't get in legal trouble. Or if you have a big enough brand, what's anybody going to really do? But I think what Charles, I think the biggest part of his brilliance, outside of being motivated enough to, take it upon himself and make something, it was his performance. He's a funny guy. And that comes back to the whole comedy thing. He did what felt right. He knew how to identify something that was him and his friends grew up doing, but then he also knew how to package it.
Yeah.
And then he was also fortunate enough to run into a bunch of people that we were convinced it was going to be huge. I remember at the time I had a possible directing thing on the side that was going to work out, and then it didn't at the last minute, and I was sort of crushed. I was like, and I remember my mom being like, "Oh, you know what? Don't worry, you'll get your opportunity one day." And I'm like, "Yeah, it's okay. What we're working on right now, I think it's going to be huge." I remember telling my mom that, and then it got through the system pretty much untouched.
Yeah.
And but that's not easy, and it's not, you can control what you can control, but there's so much that you don't control. So for things to line up like that, that's why it's important to just really again, like what Charles did, he created an opportunity for himself. Those and his friends, they became like celebrities. I don't know if anybody remembers, but they were on every fucking talk show. I mean, they were like, and they were just really nice guys too. Yeah. And we all got along really well. It must have been a little weird for Charles because suddenly he's like in the middle of this, going from shooting this little short film where I'll put the camera wherever I want, this and that. It became suddenly he was thrust into this world. I mean, you have this massive company, Budweiser, and then you had this massive agency in a skyscraper, DDB.
With his own.
But you know what? It's about, creating some opportunities for yourself and then getting them out there. And that's what happened.
And that's then moves, again, a good segue onto your short film. So you mentioned it earlier, the Nutri-Grain thing. Is that, so the Nutri-Grain spec spot, which again, kind of went viral before viral was a real thing.
It was one of the biggest, it was one of the first, even more so than Whassup. And this is the funny thing is, and it never ran on TV.
Right.
And it was crazy because I think the one thing that is, I like to try to explain to people, especially being a young guy. I mean, being in your 20s and suddenly the entire world reacting to something that you did. So when I left Chicago, I could have, and I went broke in LA. I mean, literally, because I was like, I ended up writing director's treatments. I was writing music videos for like some of the biggest, some of the biggest music video directors at the time, because they used to actually make good money back then. They used to make videos that were $100,000 videos.
Yeah.
$1 million videos. That's just what was going on. So I was doing anything I could to keep afloat, and without I could have went back and did some advertising freelance, but I didn't want to get sucked back into that world. So I had done, the unique thing about the situation, I just come from doing Whassup. And so I had that going for me a little bit, but once 9/11 happened, because I moved out to LA and 3 months later, 9/11 happened. So every opportunity I had, all that, the momentum from winning the Grand Prix and all that kind of stuff at Cannes, it was like being erased. So after I got this opportunity out of, like, again, this guy from Kansas, actually Kansas City, he was looking for that one guy to start a company with. And he was looking for an idea guy, he said. So when I met with him, I brought in, it's funny, actually. I brought in, not this exact case, but I keep all my idea books.
Yeah. Oh, right.
I've been keeping these idea books since I was 19 years old. These are filled
with your ideas, is it?
Yeah, I mean, like drawings, ideas, like, storyboards. My whole world is in these things.
Amazing.
And because I love ideas keep me company. I never get bored. Everything starts with an idea.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to show this guy that I was dedicated. And, obviously I had never shot anything, but I'd shot a bunch of little video shorts and whatnot. So I ended up getting this opportunity because I showed him some scripts that I'd written, because I'd written like hundreds of scripts. And I said, listen, because he wanted me to go and go to like Wyden and Kennedy and see if they had any spec ideas, this and that. I said, I know what the reel I need to make. And I know where I feel like I knew where advertising was going, and I knew the style of humor I wanted to do. I wanted to do a lot of visual humor, but I wanted to really go for it. And everybody that I talked to said, Justin, let me give you advice. Start simple. So what I did was I went to the opposite way. I went the most complex stuff that I could shoot. So I shot 7 spots, right. Which was funded by this guy. And a lot of people said, spec work doesn't really, sort of like cheating, da, da, da. And I was just like, it's the one opportunity to show people what I can do. And I wrote everything. I directed everything. I did all the editing, sound design. I did absolutely everything. I designed the company logo. I designed the website. I mean, I did everything. But that was my life at the time. I was in my little apartment in Santa Monica, and I was at my computer. It was me and my Macintosh. And I remember, it would have been a great ad. And I just remember like clearing out everything else. I had my blinders on. This was it. Night, day, everything.
Really?
And then the day got put up on the website, and this is crazy. It was like a week later, the website started crashing, and initially the guy I was working with was like, "Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the website." They couldn't figure out, and it kept on crashing. It turned out that when they did the investigation, the web traffic was so absolutely insane, there wasn't enough bandwidth to keep all the traffic. This guy had written an article after the Super Bowl ads and said, from geeklife.com, he wrote, the Super Bowl ads were a little disappointing this year, but if you want to see the best ads you'll ever see, go to turnpikefilms.com. And from then on, I had literally every agency emailing me. It got so weird that at first I thought it was my friends playing a prank, writing in the comment section. You had people like, there's a lot of wacky people out there, but we had like the Pentagon. We had no shit going, your Nutri-Grain ad. We watch it when we're in late night working. I got all these comments still. So within just a few months, it was 22 million hits.
Wow.
And I had, from that, I had every talent agency from, William Morris to Endeavor to UTA. I mean, everybody was trying to sign me. I got my first movie offer to do a really bad Adam Sandler movie, which, again, I respect what they do, just not what I do. So I declined. But then I got all these things coming at me. And I remember my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, who I just met literally when I finished my reel. I said, let's get out of town right now. This is just one of those, let's just let this thing, this wave kind of ride a bit. Yeah. I'll just disconnect for the weekend. We'll go to Santa Barbara and hang out, enjoy ourselves. But it was a lot like Whassup again. And to feel that twice in very close time, It was very inspiring, very unique. But it only was there because of you sort of, you listen to everybody, what everybody says, and all the advice people give you. But it ultimately got to kind of just, again, know what you can do and kind of go from there. And everything I did was just it was comedy based, but it was attached to a very specific visual style, which to be honest with you, my work hasn't changed that much.
So it's interesting because obviously this is for the Young Director Awards, and there's obviously lots of aspiring young directors out there, a part of the YDA and further afield. But so
fantastic.
Is shooting a spec commercial still a relevant way to get yourself noticed? I mean, obviously, when you did yours, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't Vimeo, there wasn't all that stuff where people can kind of put their stuff on a platform anyway. So I guess spec commercials were a bit more in vogue because they were kind of one of the only ways of really getting noticed. But is it still a good form, or is there other ways now that people, short films, music videos, what's the best approach?
Whatever works. And if you have a special voice, there's only one way. You don't want to have your voice sort of muffled by the process. To really make a dent at who you want to be as a director, it's got to come from in here. Yeah. Sitting at a big boardroom table where everybody and the client who has power and everybody says yes to them just as almost like this constant reaction, that doesn't help you out. Again, this is where you have to really say to yourself, you got to take care of yourself. Yeah. Because there's thousands of directors out there, and nobody's going to miss Justin Reardon if he's not in the creative landscape tomorrow. There's enough people. However, I feel like I have a lot to contribute still, mainly because I've always stuck to my guns. Everything will not always come out right, but the longer your career is, you can sort of absorb some of these moments where the situation doesn't allow you to put yourself into the work as deep as you want to. Yeah. But I think it's very important that you do it however you can to at least have an opportunity to get your voice out there. Yeah, yeah. I know film schools are doing spec stuff, and people have reacted to that. We represent directors. Actually, we just started representing directors at my company in Budapest, and we have a young director who's only directed Netflix series. God, I mean, what an awesome way to start. However, it's so hard to get into commercials. You could have done like all these great feature films, this and that. But advertising, it's a very specific business. You have to have the work that relates to what the projects are that you're going to be presented with. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, we had a young director just now, like I said, the Netflix guy. He just paid for a spec ad for Volkswagen, and then you start going, well, wait a minute. I have some of these trailers from my Netflix series. Then I start incorporating a few commercials. There's a consistency of how visually it looks and the craftsmanship. Then you could start building from there. Yeah. But everybody's got to figure out, everyone's got to look at themselves as an individual and say, who am I? What do I have that's interesting to say, or how I say it? And then what's around me that can get my foot in the door the way I want to get my foot in the door? People aren't like, again, everyone's a super nice person and all that kind of stuff, but no one owes you anything. Yeah. And that's the second you start thinking anybody, like, I've been doing this for so long and I still write all my own treatments. I draw all my own storyboards. I have a specific process that sometimes it's like extra work for me, but if you discipline yourself in a certain way and you don't kid yourself, like just because I did anything, if I've done anything worth a damn in the past, doesn't mean that the next project I'm going to do, it's not going to help me out. Yeah. It might help me out to get the next project, but it's not going to make that next project great. You still got to put the time in. You got to fight for things. You got to, that's one of the biggest things. You got to fight for your ideas because that's what you're getting paid for. Yeah. I mean, there's ways of doing it. And over the years, you learn better and better how to manage situations. And that comes with experience. But ultimately, you need to figure out a way to stand up for what you believe in and the ideas, because ultimately, that's your job. And the people that might be pushing against you, sometimes they don't know. They don't know what's good for them. It's something to go, well, listen, this is why this is, a good way to go. This is the right direction to push this in. Or guys, we've killed everything funny in this ad. And you want this is no longer comedy. We're kidding ourselves right now. And you have to stand up and say these things in meetings. Sometimes you have the entire, you're sitting at, the client, and you have this big boardroom and everyone's looking at you because you're throwing the wrench into that great meeting. That great meeting where everyone's like, that everyone's laughing and like looking at each other and, oh, Marsha, that's awesome. Yeah. Okay, we done. And then you're like, excuse me, guys, we need to sit that back down because we're kidding ourselves. This is not going to be good. The meeting was so good. Come on, that's not what you get paid for. And that's not going to help you keep your career long.
So obviously over the years, you've directed loads of really influential, funny, successful commercials, and you've also directed a feature film. So what did you learn? How much did commercial directing prepare you for feature film directing, and what are the kind of biggest differences?
Huge. Right. Commercial situations. Like if you're a writer, a lot of times creatively, people, like if you're a painter or a writer, an artist, you have, like Picasso, you could tell Picasso from a mile away. He had his style, he had his thing. He had, he was working from a point of view, and then working with different subject matter, filtering it through that point of view. I felt like commercials forced me to open my mind up to other people's ideas and how do I make the best version of somebody else's idea? Idea is only as good as its execution. You could have a brilliant idea, and I look at some really bad movies, going, the idea, if they did it differently, this was a great idea. Or same thing with commercials. Like there's always different ways to play it. I think there's more than one good way to play a commercial or an idea. However, you can take a beautiful idea and just completely fuck it up. Really kind of understanding, start here. And this is and when people ask me the question of, what's the difference between features as a director? It's either you see it in your head or you don't. And meaning that if you have the image go to in your head, if you have a scene, you can see how the camera, you can see the vision of it.
Yeah, sorry about that. The internet just
no worries.
Out, and that's typical. That's just the new way of working, unfortunately. So something happened and we got cut off.
I know. We'll never figure that one out.
Yeah, sorry, Justin. We were talking about feature films and the kind of the ability of or the experience of working in commercials and how that affected your feature film.
Yeah, again, what I was saying before was like if you see it. If you see the idea and the execution in your head, that's something that you just need to rely on no matter what you're doing. Commercials, movies, short films, videos, whatever. And that's why I always would tell people, you see it or you don't. And if you don't see it, then that's a whole other issue. Mm-hmm. But the one thing with feature films is and this is what I sort of just fell in love with, is there's this whole emotional arc that happens over a longer period of time, and where you invest yourself in the character of your emotions. I mean, I shot a movie that was in general about love, and it was about characters struggling with past disappointment and how that sort of restricted them in moving on with their lives and trusting love, parents, and then of course how that eventually funnels into someone you meet, a partner. And I think that's what I think the biggest difference is of ways where you really can't in commercials. Commercials, you need to pull the strings real quick, which I love, but there's also something better to kind of refreshen your approach to things, because you are dealing with a longer period of time. Even when you're doing humor, you have to go, well, is this humor? Like 90% of the movie is not funny, but there's a few of those scenes within the movie that make the whole movie. And that's what a lot of comedies do, because the type of humor, the over-the-top humor, like when you see an over-the-top comedy, it can't sustain itself for 2 hours. There's only a few movies that have ever been able to do that for me. One of them was Borat. When I saw that over-the-top humor, however, that was the brilliant thing about that movie was it had a context of reality that allowed you to question whether this is real or not. And that's where I think you're able to sustain, the visual approach, the allowed for a context that was sustainable with that type of humor. So you had very bodacious ideas, absurd ideas within the context of reality. So it kind of fucked with your mind in a way. That's one movie that I can think off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Maybe some Monty Python movies in the past, where people were just masters at making over the top ideas work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say feature films is into the subject matter, and also create a plan that can sustain itself. And also from a technical standpoint, you could do camera moves. It's like you can do, like in commercials, it's fun to be able to do long single shots and things like that to sustain a moment. But in my feature, I did, I did a lot of single shots, which kind of freaked the producers out because they wouldn't be able to recut that. I think it all comes down to really, setting up the right approach, but it all comes to seeing it in your head and relying on that vision.
Yeah. So I want to sort of wrap up, I suppose, with a kind of final question, and you kind of answered some of this already in the sort of previous discussion. But what one piece or pieces of advice would you give to any kind of young directors coming through and looking to break into the film business, be it commercials, feature films, whatever area of the business? What would be your sort of nugget of wisdom that you would say, do this, and it might not guarantee success, but it will stand you in good stead?
I would say persistence.
Right.
Again, I had a lot going for me coming into LA, and nobody, it's funny because when you're in advertising, a lot of people, like the people coming out of advertising that are wanting to be directors, sometimes the cushion that you experience inside the advertising world, as soon as you're outside of that world, you're no longer of value to a lot of people. So your value suddenly plummets. So just realize that you're going to have to do a lot on your own, and don't expect things just because, it's not going to happen overnight. And in order to sustain that career that you want, it has to come from in here. You got to do the things that, don't spend too much time doing things the way other people want you to do. Really make your mark, and make your mark of who you are and what your voice is, something that can sustain itself and gain momentum, because then you can set up your career doing things that you want to do and that you believe in that are effective. If you don't do things that are effective, that's sort of, you're not going to give people a reason to hire you. People are paying real money, but if you can find your voice and really work on your craft, be dedicated, be obsessed. Because again, when you look at all the talent out there, there's so many fucking talented directors, so many talented, and it's just never ending. So you need to give people a reason why to hire you, and you got to be obsessed and dedicated. That's all I can say. Be obsessed. I've been doing this for I've been in this business for 22 years. I'm obsessed constantly. Still have my idea books. I'm drawing constantly. Yeah. I never felt I've arrived. And I've been, I've put in a lot, but I've gotten a lot in return. So, I think whatever you put in, you'll get out.
Brilliant.
That's my end.
I think that's a perfect place to end on. Be obsessed. And Justin, look, thank you so much for joining us for this one.
No, I appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. Really insightful, really interesting. And thanks again for taking the time.
Anytime. And good luck to everybody out there.